Hey everyone, Cable's Antique Book Collective, and today I'm getting to you guys with a quick video on how to prevent your books from splitting, how to stop your books from splitting. So guys, when your leather book covers split and fall off, I think that's a bad thing. I think you guys would agree that's a bad thing. That's sort of something you don't want when you get a book. Because you bought a book, you didn't buy a bunch of paper. You bought something with a cover for a reason. It's a lot easier to transport something like this than it is something like this. Because this, it's 3 pieces. This, it's 2. So guys, when books split, it's usually going to be because of a lot of use, which, I mean, let's face it, I can't tell you how to prevent a lot of use, minus don't use it. But for 2, it's because the books dried out too much. And this is for leather books. It's going to be a different case for other things, but drying out too much is an issue for a lot of different books because when it dries out too much, it gets crumbly. So one thing you guys can do to make sure that it doesn't happen as much is to get a humidifier and dehumidifier, something that can do both. I don't know. For your area, you don't necessarily need to buy both though, because some areas will either be too wet all the time or too dry all the time. If it's a little too wet, little too dry, only some of the time, you can argue it's not as necessary. But if you want your stuff to last for a very, very, very long time, you want to make sure that the humidity is right. The EPA, I believe it is, recommend that the inside of your house remains between 35 and 55 or 30 and 50%, somewhere in there for your humidity. I would recommend that as well for your for your books. Personally, for me, I like stuff closer to the 40 to 50% range. When it's lower than that, it does dry things out a tiny bit from my experience. Of course, I could be wrong, but that's just my own personal experience. So that's what I personally like. For me, I do own a humidifier and a dehumidifier. I do use both. I do use the humidifier a little bit more often than the dehumidifier. Where I live in Oregon, it doesn't get too terribly wet in the air, but it does get dry, especially during the winter time. And that's when I use it. I use it during the winter time. My humidifier, that's what adds moisture into the air, and I use it, yes, around my books. I add moisture into the air around books, but that is because it gets so bleeping dry in the air sometimes around me. So with that said, that is something you guys can do. However, it's not everything. You cannot address every single issue with just that. There are some issues that are required to use oil for your books. Forgive me guys, this is my own product that I do sell. You guys can actually buy it down below now. I'm really excited about getting that shop section going on my YouTube channel. But and it's also cheaper to buy through that than it is on eBay or elsewhere. But you guys can buy that, or you guys can buy other oils. There are, my favorite oil blend to do is, now it is actually 90% lanolin, 10% linseed oil. That is my absolute favorite now. But there are other blends that I've talked about on my channel that you guys can check out, and I highly recommend you guys check out. With that said though, oils for these books. So guys, books do dry out, especially if you have them near a fireplace, and even near a window, it can make them dry out too much. And when leather dries out, it gets crumbly. When it gets crumbly, covers fall off. You don't want that. And if you guys do have that happen, there is stuff like conservator tape that you can use to reapply it. They have pH neutral conservative tape you can use. They have leather tapes actually that, like, it's a piece of leather with tacky stuff on one side that actually allows you to tape it back together. I don't use those. I don't like those, but those are some options. They also have different glues available that you guys could potentially use. I have not and will not do that for this particular set, but it is something I have used glues on other books in other instances. Only reason why I'm not doing it with this particular set is this set is quite large. There are quite a few loose covers, so I'm letting the buyer, whoever ends up buying these, deal with it. If you guys have been following the channel for any amount of time, you've known that I've had these Oregon Report books for quite some time. I haven't listed the leather ones yet for varying reasons. One of them being they've been tortured by me for a long time. Guys, having this many books that are around the same age, but they are the same leather, they are made the same way, all that sort of stuff, for me, being able to run tests for my oils here on things that I can literally A/B test all these different books, it has been very, very nice. And because of that, I was able to really hammer out the best possible blend for this particular oil. And I know this is going to sound like a sales video, sorry for that, but oils definitely can be something that helps you guys. So with that said, this book right here, its cover split off. We can see that. So covers, when they fall off like that, it is going to happen along the hinge right here. The hinge, when it dries out, it cracks. When it cracks, it breaks off. That is how things work. Some antique books, they actually have a cloth strip on the inside of that, which prevents it from happening, prevents it from detaching, because the cloth is not subject to the same damage from lack of moisture as leather is. It's not going to crack and break off the same way, which is why cloth is really, really nice. Personally, I love leather more, but cloth is so much better for durability. But with that said, sometimes you still have it cracking, you still have it splitting. The hinge is the weakest point on these books. Sometimes you do get damage on the spine, like parts of the spine will actually fall off, all that sort of stuff. So it does depend on the specific book where the weakest point is, but usually it's not going to be the middle of the cover that's falling apart. With that said though, guys, I'm just going to quickly show you what I do. So again, guys, I use my Book Balm. The reason for that is the essential oils that I add to it. It is a specific blend of essential oils, and it's also a specific blend of the oil itself. I find that this is the absolute best for books, and in addition to that, it's what has historically been used. And I'm not afraid to oil these books because, for one, these books, they were so abused when I got them, so dried out when I got them, because these books were actually kept near a fireplace. Of course, I did not go to where these were actually kept, but I could tell based on the damage from these that these books experienced that they were near a fireplace for a certain amount of their lives. Personally, I would expect that around the 60s-ish, they were actually purchased by someone who didn't have them by a fireplace after that, but that's just rampant speculation on my part. But with that said, I have just a little dollop of my Book Balm on my finger right now. You guys can use other oils, but I highly recommend you guys use a blend of 90% lanolin, 10% linseed oil, or 10 parts lanolin, 1 part linseed oil. That's the recipe that I have you guys for approximation if you want to make it yourselves afterwards. It is cheaper though for most cases to actually buy my Book Balm. Again, why I like my Book Balm. It's cheaper for you guys to actually buy from me directly for the reason that you don't need that much, and if you try to get a whole lot, it can be quite expensive, and there's not a lot of companies selling not a lot of these oils that you need for this, and the essential oils are where it really racks up in price. And again, guys, the essential oils I do, they have their purposes. It's for mold, to prevent mold growth, and also for bookworms, to prevent bookworms. But with that said, I am taking the cover right here, and along the hinge, again, I have my little bit of Book Balm right here, and I'm literally just running my finger gently along this hinge right here. This hinge actually does have some cracks on it from the previous owner just not treating it as nicely as they should have, honestly. So guys, just one little bead along this whole thing, and working it in the spots that feel a little bit dry. And I'm being careful to avoid these spots with the paper. I have gone over these papers areas with all of the oil before. I just don't like to do it too much. I did do it I want to say one time for all these books with a more penetrating one. So this blend, guys, it's again about 10% linseed oil. With the blend that I went over all these with, it was 30% linseed oil, and the reason for that was it was really, really dry, and I needed to really penetrate in with that. The 10% is absolutely fantastic though for most cases. So with that said, you guys saw I just did a little bead along this entire edge on the hinge, and now I'm just going to do that same thing on the other side. And there's a tiny little flap of loose leather here, which I could glue down, I could avoid, I could cry about. I don't really know. I'm actually going to let it fall off if it falls off though, because again, guys, these books are damaged to the point that there's not a whole lot I can do to save them, minus continuing to oil them like I am, as that oil slowly penetrates deeper and deeper into them and makes them more limber. And guys, let me tell you, these books have gotten so much softer, so much more limber since I started oiling them, started my experimenting on them, and it's been a great benefit for them. However, it hasn't been 100%, let me be honest. I cannot put a cover back on with oil. That will take some other work. So with that said, let me just go over that little loose part really quick. Oh yeah, obviously it's stuck back down because I'm using something oily. It's going to stick back up on its own. It will need glue to go back down on its own. And as you guys can see here, I am going over the paper part right here. It's not actually a paper, I believe it, or it could be honestly, but I believe it is just some printing onto some thin leather, I'm not 100% certain. I haven't done any like DNA tests on it, but this is basically how I go about treating these books and oiling these books on the hinges. The hinges are the places that I'm most worried about. In addition to that, I'm quite worried about the spines. The spines on these guys, in fact, I have some pieces right over here. They were just falling apart, pieces everywhere. So I make sure to oil the spines extra, as well as the oil penetrates deeper and deeper into these books. And guys, these books, again, because they were so dry, because they were stored in such a dry place, with so much lack of humidity, they take so much more oil than all other books that I have dealt with. In fact, like, I've oiled a lot of books. The only books that I've dealt with that were worse than this actually came from the same place, the same library, but they came from a different owner. And those, the leather literally was like powder. Like, if you touched it, you got leather on your fingers that was just straight leather powder. And it was really, really bad. And as you guys can see, I'm going over lightly all this paper stuff too, because it's A, hard to avoid, and B, I've shown that it doesn't, I've tested and seen that it doesn't cause damage on these specific books. Of course, don't do this on all of your books. Be sure to run tests before you do, but it is something that I do on these books. And now, I guess I did say I did it once, now I've done it twice on this specific one. So with that said, my Book Balm, again, I'm selling the Book Balm to you guys, I'm sorry, but the Book Balm, I love using this stuff because lanolin, it actually seals the moisture in very, very well. That's one of the reasons why they use lanolin on lotions. For most of these like high-end lotion brands, they actually will use lanolin because of how well it locks moisture into place. And forgive me as I set this down and continue my work. I think you guys should be able to see this, but I cannot do it in my hand very well because I do need to press a little bit firmer on it and have it flat like this because of how fragile this book is. So with how firm I have to press, it does bend at the hinge a little bit, and I just don't trust these hinges enough to do that in my hand without this set down on its side like so. So with that said, as you guys can see, I am doing circular motions onto the cover, and I've already shown you guys how to apply oil in other videos, but I am doing it again once more just to sort of show like how easy it is. And like, look, you can do figure eights, you can do straight. I don't recommend doing straight lines though, because you do need to do a little bit of circles to help work that oil in. And I do oil these particular books a little bit more than others. Again, I'm just trying to really work that oil into these covers that they're 100 years old and they got abused for those 100 years. Oi, dog. Ooh, doggy. In fact, let's see, the oldest ones are from the 1890s. I think I might have one or two from the 1880s. So because of that, that's most likely that entire time these books not being oiled a single time, and they are incredibly dry for that. And right here I'm going in straight lines. There is some embossing. You guys can probably see the lines right there, but that embossing is a straight line, so I'm just following that embossing to make sure that I'm working the oil straight into it, because the circles, yeah, they can do it, but it's a little more effective to go with the grain in that case. Of course, I'm going back over it with circles, but with the grain to get most of it in there. So forgive me, I know I'm blocking it right now for you guys. I'll turn it around in a second, but hooey! I'm just being as careful as I can with these things because, again, they are still quite fragile. Down here, you guys can see the leather is actually peeled and the finish of it has actually come off. And I've found that the lanolin, because it does seal, it actually has sealed those areas up really well, and they continued cracking and getting worse and worse until I put that lanolin on, and it just stopped peeling, it stopped cracking. It did so much because this lanolin holds the moisture down in there. And obviously I know I'm talking up the lanolin a whole lot, so you guys are probably thinking, oh yeah, I'll just buy lanolin. Absolutely, you can do that. But as I mentioned earlier on in this video, the linseed oil does a whole lot to work moisture deeper into the leather itself. In some cases, you guys might not be thrilled with that. And if you have to choose one oil, again, I would choose lanolin, I would not choose linseed oil. But it is really, really nice being able to work these in. And as you guys can see, I'm going back over, doing some straight lines over the areas that I already hit. That is just me scooping up all the extra oil that is not currently absorbed into the book. And obviously I know I'm missing a tiny film, and that's actually a good thing that I'm missing a tiny film, but I'm working all that really extra stuff out of those other areas and pushing it to this drier area just for the sake of making sure that too much oil does not sit in one spot for too long. You do not want oil to sit in one spot too long because it can penetrate too deeply into the book, past the leather into the book board, and that can actually cause damage long term. So as you guys can see, I got a little too much oil right there. You need more like that much for the finishing touch right here on this corner. Just a whole lot of small concentric circles, and going over everything one more time. And I'm watching the hinge as I go, and the hinge, it isn't cracking as I'm doing it. It has give now. It didn't have give when I first bought these books, and when I first started oiling it, it didn't have a whole lot of give also because this thing dried out so insanely much. And with that said, I'm not going to do the back cover for you guys on this video because, well, for one, it's going to be a long video if I do that, but for two, I'm going to have to do that in another sitting anyways. I'm going to have to oil all of these books again because they're just so stinking dry. But the lanolin, the ones that I've hit with it several times, are in such good shape now. Again, I do need to keep on hitting these because they got so dry and so abused in their time. Personally, I think these must have belonged to someone who lived in a desert for a while with how dry and just painfully dry they got. I mean, it couldn't just be fireplace dryness, and I do have fingerprints all over it once I'm done. In fact, let me see if you guys can actually see the fingerprints all over it, but lots of fingerprints. It's so bad, but what you do after you finish oiling your book, personally I'm just doing one side so I can sit it down and not worry about it getting sticky because it's a little tacky still, but once this sits and you're finished, let it sit for 12 hours, preferably 24. You can even do 48. 48 is really nice, but let it sit for that long. And once it's sat for that long, it's absorbed all the oil that it's going to be absorbing. And then you can get a piece of paper towel, get a soft paper towel, or a nice soft rag. This rag, guys, make sure it's one that doesn't have like basically shag carpet on it. You got to make sure it's one that is softer than a handkerchief, but sort of think of like a handkerchief for how smooth it is. You don't want anything with a whole lot of grabbiness because it can grab some weaker parts of the leather and actually pull that up. But once you're all done, I would dab dry at first, depending on how much you used, and then you can then, rolling over all the clean spots, take off as much of the residual oil as you can, and you go until the book is not necessarily entirely as dry as it was before, because it's going to be a little bit more moist because you put moisture back into it with your lanolin, with your linseed oil, or preferably with your Book Balm. Buy it down below. But with that said, that is what you do to clean it all off afterwards, but you do want to have it sit, and please do not handle the book like opening it and shutting it with the oil on it. For one, you can accidentally like flick some oil into the book itself onto the paper, and you can't clean that off the paper, and that'd be quite unfortunate that your efforts to save the book actually ends up damaging the book. But for two, you want the oil to be able to penetrate into that hinge, into the rest of the cover before you open and close it, because that penetration of the oil helps ensure that you're not cracking that leather every time you open and close it. Once it's penetrated in, it's lubricated once again. It is able to move once again without damaging it. So that is like paramount that you let it penetrate in for a little while. So with that said and done, I hope this video was helpful for you guys. Again, you don't have to buy my specific brand, but please use my specific recipe. There are lots of other very smart people out there who use different oils, different recipes, all that sort of stuff. Please use natural ones, not synthetic ones. The synthetic ones do have issues for what they do to leather. But with that said, honestly, just putting in the effort to actually oil your books that need it can do a whole lot to make sure that your covers do not split off. So with that said and done, I hope this video was very helpful for you guys. If it was, please be sure to drop a like, share this video with people that you know that have leather books that need a little bit of oiling, and please be sure to buy my Book Balm as well if it does help you guys. It actually can be cheaper for you to buy from me than to get it online elsewhere for the recipes and such to make it yourself with all your own things. If you have lanolin on hand and you have linseed oil on hand though, then it can be a whole lot cheaper to just use what you have on hand. Of course, I do highly recommend the essential oils that I do add into these. The reason being that these essential oils were handpicked by me for the purposes of reducing the risk of mold and reducing the risk of bookworms. Those essential oils are really nice for that. In addition, it does give your books a little bit nicer of a smell. It's not so much as overwhelming, but it is enough that it is noticeable of not just being an old smelly book. It's like, ooh, this is nice. So with that said and done, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing as well, for those of you that do subscribe, and thank you for sharing all that sort of stuff. Be sure to check out one of my other videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.